It's the calm before the storm.
Speaking of storms, got home. The power was out when we left, so I had to disengage the garage door in order to put it down. And got home last night around midnight and, had to manually put the door up. And then this morning, I forgot that I hadn't re-engaged it. I tried last night, couldn't figure out how to do it. And I figured I'd call somebody this morning if I needed to, and I forgot until I went out to the car. Oh no, I can't get the door open. So that's why we were late, trying to figure out a way to, I can't get that thing to go back up in the right place. So I have to take care of it when we get home this afternoon, I guess.
To make sure the doors flare down before the snap in there.
Okay, I think it was. But anyway, the guy who put it in for me, I had on the phone this morning, but I was running out of time, so we'll get a hold of him this afternoon again. All right, well, here we are back again in the Gospel of Luke. Enough about my woes, except the fact that my notes aren't coming up. Let's see, try again here.
It's all memory.
Okay, let's close that. Try again. Okay, there we are. I think that we had gone through verse 36, did we?
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay, let's go back to verse 27 and read 27 through 36, and then we'll go into verse 37 today. Would someone like to read that? Dave, thank you.
But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. Whoever hits you on the cheek, offer him the other also. And whoever takes away your coat, do not withhold your shirt from him either. Give to everyone who asks of you, and whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back. Treat others the same way you want them to treat you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners in order to receive back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great. And you will be the sons of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and evil men.
36 also.
Be merciful just as your Father is merciful.
Okay,
Can I say one
Yeah.
thing real quick here?
I was going to ask, does anybody have anything to say?
Yeah. I do. Go ahead, Bill.
Does anyone have anything to say? Okay, moving on.
It's been interesting here because I've been at home, I've been going over this and going over this and but going back to verse 27, but to those who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you. I have a neighbor who hates me.
Oh, my.
Imagine that.
It's true. This man is maybe not to this extent, but he is kind of the epitome of evil. It's been a probably a 3-year adventure with him, and God just told me, he said, you need to go talk to him. And there he was in the yard, and I'm thinking like, oh, I don't want to do this, because the guy's about 6'4", he was about 250, and I thought because we haven't talked in 3 years, and so I thought, oh boy. So anyway, so I went over and tried to strike up a conversation with him, and it did not go well. For about, I apologized to him for different things, and for about 40 minutes, he yelled at me and he swore at me and said bad things at me and I just stood there and just kind of took it, And, but I knew I did what I had to do. It was one of those things where like, this word love, here, you love your enemies. This is not a natural love. This is a supernatural kind of thing, because this is not something that we just do on our own. You just can't do this in the natural man. So anyways, so after that all happened, I left, and as you read further, I think
Are you gonna get to the tree part?
no,
Was it his tree that,
no,
okay,
no,
Oh,
different
different neighbor, okay.
different neighbor. But but I walked away rejoicing that I could have been kind of blasphemed. But anyway, I did the right thing, and my whole attitude about him has totally changed. I pray for him every day, and which I did not ever do. But I pray for him every day that God would convict him and draw him to himself. And so, but yeah, but just you're talking about this love thing. Those who hate you, yeah. Those who curse you, yeah. Those who mistreat you, yeah. And but you just have to do what God calls you to do.
That's wonderful.
And
Yeah.
it was very interesting. At one point, I didn't know that Dave was doing this, but I saw him out in the yard, and I saw that our neighbor was
Loud.
very angry. And so I thought maybe I'll just be a stabilizing presence and just stand there and not say anything. And I had to, at one point I had to speak, and I said, John, sorry, neighbor, Dave has asked you for forgiveness. And he says, I'm sorry. I will never forgive. I cannot forgive. And I said, this is hurting you. It's not hurting us, but it makes the point that love is supernatural. That he was literally unable, we were, it was just laying it down. But he was just totally unable. And what a terrible burden for him to be carrying, So yeah. Pray for our neighbor.
Yeah, pray for our neighbor.
I think one thing about that is it's off of your shoulders. You did as much as possible with you.
Right.
And when you do that, it lifts that burden.
Right.
You just still pray that you don't have that heavy weight carrying around on you. At least that's what my experience was. If I do that, I feel like, okay, Lord, I did what I can. Please, now you got to take over from there.
Yeah.
Because I can't.
And I think as you pray for him, I think there's some bipolar things. I think there's some extreme anger issues and authority. He punched a cop 2 years ago. So sometimes he loses control.
How much time you spend in jail?
He did go to jail. But he needs the Lord. Bottom line, he needs kind of salvation.
Yeah, that needs to be our perspective ultimately with people
Right.
with whom we have trouble. They need the Lord.
Yeah, they're bound in sin.
Yeah.
They're bound up.
Yeah. Great. That's what we all ought to do probably every week is take, the message that we hear, what we talk about here, and think about it during the week. And I admit that it's not something I do often do, but Dave's a good example for us, how the Lord will use that. Anybody, any other comments or?
Well, we had trouble with neighbor kids that lived right next door. And I mean, I could go on and on with all of the things that they did. It started with hitting our middle daughter when she was about 3-4 years old with a shovel. She got a scar on her leg to bleed. He used to do stuff even to his own little brother. He used to bang into his bicycle and all this stuff. But the last straw was when the little brother said, my brother stabbed Melissa's tires with a knife and threw it up on the roof. I looked up it was their roof. I looked up on the roof and there was the knife and Melissa's tires were flat. So we put up a fence. And I always thought at the time we were taking the kids to Word of Life. Or, well, we called it Awana, it was Awana. And we were taking them out to Bailey Road, which is a pretty good drive. And I thought about taking those kids with me. But then I was afraid for my own kids and you know what might happen. And to this day, I almost wish I really had made the effort because he ended up taking he overdosed and he died. And he was in his 20s. And that's so sad too, you know, when you don't.
Yeah, we need to obey those impulses, maybe from the spirit to act kindly, to show love, to take bullies to Awana or whatever it might be. Yeah. Anyone else?
To put in the plug for Table Talk. Because it's been going through Luke.
Oh.
You know,
Yeah,
it's been really.
we haven't been using it because have already done it. So, but yeah, Table Talk magazine, if you want to get that, that's going through the Gospel of Luke as well. Good review. So you can go online, Ligonier Ministries, and get that. You can get a free, is it a month or something like that? And then they do want you to pay for it after that, but it's worth it. Or you can look online. If you ever talk to the Mackeys, they'll tell you how grateful they are for getting Table Talk. They go through it every day or read the devotional every day. One of the few devotionals that I would recommend, because it's not taking a verse out of context and then having a bunch of stories that don't have really much to do with the text. It's going through the text through books of the Bible. Okay, anything else? All right. So be merciful. Why? Because God the Father is merciful. And all we have to do is think about his mercy toward us. And that should influence then how we act toward others. I think that in verses 37 and 38, we have explanations of being merciful. So keep that in mind. The overarching theme of these next two verses is how to show mercy. And the first one I've entitled Judge Not. You should look at verse 37. Do not judge and you will not be judged. So this we come now to this verse, which is the only verse that every pagan in America knows is in the Bible. Yep. It also seems to be the most often quoted verse by those claiming to be Christians. Just try to raise issues of morality or accountability to someone, and this verse raises its ugly head. I remember even as far back as the 70s, before it became really popular, quotes this verse, talking with my cousin and his first wife at a family reunion. And I don't remember what the topic of conversation was, but I must have said something about sin or orthodoxy or something important. And they stated, don't judge. Well, yeah, who are we to judge? Well, we'll talk about that. Because although this verse is widely known, it is largely misunderstood. So hopefully we'll gain some understanding today as we look at verse 37. Do not judge and you will not be judged. The word judge here, A.T. Robertson points out, is actually, because it is a present imperative, which means that present tense means a continual action. Imperative means it's a command. So this is a command that you're continually do, and that is not judging. And he says it's forbidding the habit of criticism. He goes on to say the common verb krino, to separate, we have in our English words critic, criticism, criticize, discriminate. Now, Jesus does not mean that we are not to form opinions, but not to form them rashly, unfairly, like our prejudice. So we are not to judge in the sense of having prejudice against people, of being critical towards people in, and again, back to the topic, an unmerciful way. We are to have mercy toward others, and not judge them, not judge their motives, not be critical of them in such a way that we forget mercy. And he says, you will not be judged. That's an aorist tense, which looks more at a one-time event or an event as a whole. So don't continually criticize other people and you won't be judged at a point. The Talmudic book Soda 1:7 reads, with the measure a man measures, it will be measured to him again. Jewish rabbinical leader Hillel stated, do not judge thy neighbor until thou comest into his place. Or we have an expression, before you judge a man, walk a mile in his shoes. Now, Jesus is saying, don't be a critic. He's obviously not advocating the elimination of all judgment. That would be impossible. We would certainly be lost in a maelstrom of chaos if we were to suspend all judgments. So this is neither an unconditional nor a universal statement. It's a moral axiom that in general is a good thing to observe, but it is not a moral absolute. So we might compare it to the proclamations that we have made throughout the book of Proverbs. You know, read the book of Proverbs and you find that there are things given there that are good advice. There are things to follow, but they're not without exception. And in fact, they require discernment themselves, because you have in one verse, don't answer a fool according to his folly. And in the very next verse, it says, answer a fool. So you've got to understand that there are ways of discerning how to use them. And this is one of those cases. In fact, there are several times when we are called upon in Scripture to judge our fellow believers in church discipline. That requires judgment. So this is not referring to a court of law or church procedures or of personal discernment. We're not to go through life personally or as a church naively. Oh, don't judge, don't judge. But we are to go through life without prejudicially criticizing our brothers and sisters in Christ. Now, what are some examples of how this might take place? Either that you have witnessed, participated in.
It's
Carol?
all over the place in our lives. We bump up against that constantly. My dearest friend called, and for her in-law's funeral, they got a woman. They didn't go to church. Her mother-in-law doesn't go to church, and these friends of ours who were very good Christians and always went. Since COVID, they've never gone back, and it just upsets me. But they got a woman pastor to do the service, and she said the only thing wrong with her is she goes running bare feet. And I thought, well, that's not the only thing wrong. And judge not, lest you be judged, but God says women shouldn't be pastors. So I'm not, you got to be careful not to get sarcastic, but
We're not the one going to judge them.
God,
Yeah.
God says.
Well, and I think in that case, the discernment is that that situation shouldn't exist, but the judgment, the criticism may be in judging their motives in doing that, so they don't have any bad motives in doing what they're doing. They're just ignorant, or
They aren't ignorant.
they aren't ignorant. Okay, then in that case, you can judge their motives.
Confusing.
You wonder what in the world they're doing. Yeah, John?
But we're ignorant, because in order to judge, you have to have a standard. That's why Christ is our judge.
Yeah.
Because he is the standard. And our problem, I think, especially within the church today, and I think we've all witnessed this, is we judge, we tell people they're wrong, and this is wrong, and don't do this, don't do that. But we don't know what the standard is. We haven't even taken the time. When we go to look at the standard, we put our slant on that standard. Okay, that standard doesn't have a slant. We're to learn from it. It isn't to learn from us. So I think that when you see a lot of this stuff, that's exactly what you're running into.
And when you think about, at least my experience, I doubt if it's much different than yours in churches throughout all my life, is that most of the judging and the criticism isn't over doctrinal issues or things that are clearly stated in Scripture. It's over preferences. well, that person shouldn't wear that to church, and that person shouldn't do that, and we shouldn't have that kind of music in church, and we shouldn't. We changed the order today. You know, that's. I remember as a kid, my dad was on the deacon board at our local Baptist church, and and he would come home after deacons meetings and just rip upside one side down the other the pastor and how terrible he was and all this, and yet I would go to church and listen. I think, man, the guy's doing a good job. He's teaching the word, but and that's the common expression is you go home for dinner after church and roast the pastor. And that happens so frequently that's become a joke. Yeah.
Lazy Christian. We don't take the time to learn scripture. So in order not to study it, we come up with our own interpretations, our own perceptions.
Yeah.
Rather than taking the time and saying, this is what is to be done. And then we go off in all kinds of different ways. I mean, not only in the church, but outside of the church. Makes the church look silly, makes us look silly, individually.
And the more we're students of the word, I would think the less critical we'll be over those issues that really aren't that important. By the way, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm so glad that we have a guy like Bill Dunn in our church that has tattoos all over himself and uses that as a ministry. I don't know if anybody's offended by that or not. If you are, shame on you. But I'm glad he's here just to demonstrate that's okay. And I remember Pastor saying a few months ago, he was talking about judging and I mentioned something about having, even if you have purple hair or whatever. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but there was a young lady with purple hair that, did you see that? Is that what you said? Well, that's appropriate. Because, we all have it. I have to admit, I have a tendency sometimes to be critical of people and the way they look, thinking, okay, why is their hair that color and stuff like that? And, I have to have a constant check on myself as well. Yeah, Carol?
Forget already, it went right out, was in.
Sorry. Yes.
So somehow the second part of that has to do with the first part, judge not, and you not be judged, and then it's the semicolon, condemn not. So it almost seems like the condemnation part or the condemn part has a finality to the judging, and I think that has something to do with the judging.
Okay, unless somebody else has something else, we'll go on to that because I think that's the next step.
Just one word that always helps me here is judgmentalism.
Mm-hmm.
And it uses the same word, but then it helps us understand the attitude that's really behind it.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I know this one lady who used to go to this one church in the McDonald Baptist Church. I don't know if you know that church, but
Heard of it.
she was talking to me about how she thinks it's evil people to have tattoos and to wear beards and stuff. And I said, well, if you came to my church, you'd really flip out because we got guys in my church who have beards and mustaches, and we have guys who have tattoos, and one guy is even a tattoo artist, and yet they serve Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, well, I think that's evil, a very evil church. And I said, no, it's not. You're just being too judgmental.
Yeah, that's right. Judging by an outward appearance, all that. Okay, the next step, I think, when you judge, when you're judging somebody, being critical of them, the next step is that you condemn them. And so he says, condemn not, judge not. Oh, we already talked about that. I thought this was interesting. It's such an issue that I don't know if this is real or not, but apparently it is. There's actually a judge not conference to address this because it's so rampant in society. And so you can see, I mean, the guys that are, I know a couple of the guys that are on there. And Olmsted Falls, that's not too far away from here. So I'm not, and it's sponsored by the Bible Thumping Wingnut. So I don't know, is that real or not, Beth? Do you think?
Well, Bible thumping, no.
I know, but did he put that on as a parody or is it? Because he does stuff like, Yeah, so it's a real address.
You know it, guys?
Yeah, well, Phil Johnson, J-
Yeah, Phil Johnson.
yeah, so, the thing is, the people who probably most need that wouldn't go. I don't know. Unless they would go there to judge.
Are we judging that we should be careful?
Okay, anyway, I thought, I came across that. And I didn't think to look up judgenotconference.org. See what's that. But anyway, okay, so next is condemnation, condemn not. So we have two negatives here. First, judge not, and then condemn not, and you will not be condemned. To condemn simply means to give a judgment against someone, and as I think Dave said, in a kind of a final way. And again, this is a present tense imperative, which means continually, as a command, don't have the habit of condemning people, and then you will not be condemned. All right. Can we go further for any examples of this, of condemnation, even beyond just criticism of somebody? Yeah.
I'm like Dave, I have a neighbor that just has. They, as little kids, they rode my bus and they were, oh, so bad, so messed up. And the mother, I've invited her Bible study over and over and she didn't want to hear it. And both kids really went in a sorry direction. The one girl became a Playboy bunny and the boy is now a girl. And I care that this is happening and I would love to be able to reach them. But I've tried and they don't want to hear me or even be a friend, no over the fence friendship at all.
Mhm.
But how do you go from there and not say, "Oh, they're condemning themselves.
Mhm.
I am done."
Yeah.
Is it wrong to be done?
It reminds me of what Jesus said about casting pearls before swine, that, you know, after a while,
Or somebody
after a while
can't
you,
help it,
but then there's that.
though. I mean,
And,
it's hard.
and I think you can continue to pray for somebody without maybe what they would term badgering them with
Yeah.
the truth. That's hard, but we just have certainly continue to pray for people no matter what. And pray that, I mean, God is able to open doors. You know, how many times have we experienced? Well, just like what Dave was talking about, God impressed upon him to go talk to his neighbor, and there his neighbor was.
Yeah. Right.
So-
The boy shot himself in the chest and was in the hospital for a while. And I went over and said, "Can I take care of your animals?" You know, I try. It just never gets there. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well,
know.
you can't force it. You know, it's got to be God working, but
Press salt is to be salt. And so Dave did nothing else. He pressed salt right into that wound. That guy knows,
yeah,
okay, so it's up to him about the energy now to keep fighting against it.
mhm.
Because it's settled.
So again, it comes back to attitude. We might say, well, they've condemned themselves and you feel badly about it. What Jesus is talking about here is having a condemnatory attitude. And even though you might say what you just said, that doesn't, you don't have an attitude that's like that. And that's what Jesus is more addressing here. And of course, hypocrisy comes into this as well, which Jesus addresses other places, but to make sure that we're not condemning others. Well, we already talked about that with didn't we? Did we talk about the plank in the eye? Or is that coming up?
Yeah.
Did we talk about that? I've looked over this so much, I forget what we've covered and what we haven't. I don't think we did, but I think that's coming up, right? Okay, so we'll talk about the hypocrisy later. But as I was looking at this, I thought of something that an old parishioner of mine once said, Bob Cole, maybe some of you know him, he goes to Old North. He said, be careful that the platform from which you preach does not become the gallows from which you hang. So make sure that we're not being hypocrites in our judgment and condemnation. Yeah.
Can you explain what the difference is when you're talking to a Christian that, you know is doing wrong or choosing sin, as opposed to somebody who's not, where there's judgment, where there's, not criticism, but actually talking? How does that fit in?
Yeah, certainly we're told in other places of scripture that we are to go to a brother that we see in sin. So he's not talking about that here. He's not saying don't go to someone who's in sin. What he's talking about is that critical attitude that we sometimes have toward people that is not necessarily related to helping them out of their sin. It's more of kind of building ourselves up by putting others down. That's generally what happens. You know, it's kind of like the Pharisee. Thank God I'm not like this guy. You know, and so we criticize others because it makes us feel better. So I think that'd be a
maybe like
difference.
legalism stuff,
Yeah.
like, okay, that makes, okay.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Okay, we have time to go to the hopefully the last two parts of being merciful. Remember, this is all under the umbrella of being merciful. And the next one is resent not. And I put that in negative, although he says in a positive, pardon, and you will be pardoned. And again, a present active imperative, continue to do this as a command. Literally, the word pardon here is the word it means release. Some translate this as forgive. And it was helpful to me many years ago to hear a Bible teacher talking about the word that often is translated forgive, and the word in the Greek is, if you take any Greek, you always learn luo. All the forms of speech and all what do you call the, not declensions, the declensions of the word luo, which means to loose. Well, that's what forgiveness is, and pardon here is loose. And it's helpful, I think, to understand that when you forgive somebody, when you pardon them, you are basically loosing them from attachment to whatever it is that they did. Does that make sense? It's like you see them, you look at them and you see this burden of sin on them, or however you want to picture it, and you loose them from that in your own mind, so that when you see them, you don't attach that anymore. Does that make sense? So that's how you, even though they still have the sin, but that's not how you view them. You loose them from that, and especially if it's a sin against you. So you pardon, you loose them, and you will be loosed or pardoned. Now, what are some examples of how that might take place? And some of this overlaps with what we've already said, probably, but when you pardon someone, when you loose them, what are some ways that you've experienced that, or examples of how that might work? Jeff?
Years ago, I had someone did something really bad to my wife and I kind of followed them, and I even put my shotgun, I was gonna shoot them. And after I heard the talks, then I went to him and I forgave him. So I guess that's an example of it.
Yeah. I think I mentioned before, my neighbor who, I won't go into all the details that I probably already have, but had yelled at me when I was trying to help her and was angry, and she a few weeks later called me over and apologized for yelling at me, and said, you know, are we friends? And I said, yeah. And I, like I told you then, I should have said, because I already forgave you before, which I had. But I didn't think of it at the time. But that's the thing, when somebody does something bad, just to loose them from it right then.
I think too, in terms of the church, we're going to the same thing, is that is not only the big things that happen in our lives, that's the little things that happen in our lives. We know little things about everybody in this room. Okay, and we have a tendency to want to frame people in a legalistic way.
Mhm.
But Christ tells us to loose them from that, and see them as his image,
Mhm.
and treat them with the love and respect.
Again, by his mercy. Yeah.
Those little things we got. I had an example with my mom because she just held on to everything and became bitter. And the bitterness was just overwhelming in her life. That's all she was bitter. And I think you gotta make sure you let go of any bitterness right away, because
Mhm.
it's hurting you.
Mhm.
It's so destructive. And
It's just what Jenny was telling their neighbor.
it's so destructive.
Yeah.
And especially in church, if some people get, if you say something wrong, maybe they'll get hurt, let go. And it's not, 9 times out of 10, you mishear or
Mhm.
misunderstand or
Mhm.
something. I hate texting because you don't get the
Yeah,
context.
yeah,
See that face.
yeah, John.
Our son has a saying that when somebody treats them poorly or does something against them or doesn't pay them when they should, or is this gonna make you bitter or better?
Mhm.
So that's the way he looks at it, and he tries to get me to look at it that way too.
Yeah, that's good. Sometimes the children need to teach the fathers, right? Yeah, Jenny?
One teaching on unforgiveness or bitterness that. I mean, this must have been 25 or 30 years ago. A friend of ours has 6 kids. You know, ranging, at that time, they're ranging from baby to maybe 15 or something like that. But he did his sermon on unforgiveness and he said at first to somebody, it's just a baby, you want to hold it tight, picked up the youngest. But that grows, and then he said he went to the next child and a little heavier. And then he worked his way down through his children to his oldest son. And now he's carrying this huge burden. And that picture just made such an impression on me of the weight of that. And
Yeah.
that was really good.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, I'm convicted. I should cook one of my cookies.
Yeah.
Love covers multiple.
Yeah. All right, I hate to not get through all of the ways in which we can show mercy, but the next one is gonna take a little while to go through. So next week we'll come back to, I forgot about this. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. That was pretty good. Yeah.
You'll have a quote here from MacArthur on this. And he says, the goal of all 4 commands is to have sinners not judge or condemn believers, but be forgiving and generous. If that is happening, it indicates that unbelievers have accepted them and they have an opportunity to proclaim the gospel. When believers love non-believers like God does, compassionately, kindly, mercifully, and forgivingly, to demonstrate the transforming power of salvation.
Yeah. It's a witness, yeah. Is next week Easter? Yeah. Are we gonna be meeting next week?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. All right, next week, we're gonna look at Hoard Not. So be thinking about that and be thinking about what we've covered this week. And maybe God will give you some opportunities to exercise, not judging, not condemning, and pardoning.
I'm sure he will.
Years. But
Oh, no.